Fuel management is one of the most important parts of operating an aeroplane. The consequences of completely running out of fuel are severe. Engines will splutter to a halt, electrical systems will fail, and the aircraft will be left to glide aimlessly down to Earth. As far as emergencies go, running out of fuel is one of the most dreaded for pilots, and it's easy to see why. Air Tahoma Flight 185, a cargo flight operating from Memphis International to Cincinnati, takes off in the dead of night on the 13th of August 2004. Operating on behalf of DHL, the Convair 580 departs with 7,900 pounds of fuel, with an expected fuel burn to Cincinnati of 4,200 pounds. 12,400 pounds of cargo are in the back, making the takeoff weight 54,513 pounds. The captain, aged 49, has only recently joined the company. However, he has significant experience on the Convair 580, with 1,337 hours on the turboprop. The first officer also joined the company earlier in 2004, and is the pilot flying this sector. The weather is fine, and the crew will have air traffic control available to them for the whole flight. The Convair 580 is part of the Convair 240 family, originally designed as a replacement for the legendary DC-3. The 580 features turboprop engines, a pressurized cabin, and versatile design. 5 container spots are utilised for the cargo configured aircraft. As the plane settles in the cruise segment of the flight, the captain engages the crossfeed system. This allows for both engines to be fed fuel from the single tank, granting pilots the ability to keep fuel levels even.
Just gonna balance out some fuel here.
Okay.
Over the next 9 minutes, the captain works on weight and balance calculations. He needs to confirm that the aircraft will be within both max weight and centre of gravity limits for landing. The crew also become preoccupied with preparing the aircraft for descent. 15 minutes later, he states,
Okay, back with you here.
The paperwork is now in order and the captain signs it off. The first officer, who is still flying, reveals that the aircraft is behaving strangely.
Huh? Something's messed up with this thing.
Does he have us on a heading or...
No. I was on VOR.
Okay. Yeah, I never touched nothing. You're still on blue light.
The first officer grows increasingly concerned over the next several minutes. He makes more statements indicating that something is not quite right. The captain shows little concern, eventually providing some feedback as the FO makes a complaint for the 5th time. However, the conversation gets cut off by air traffic control.
What in the world is going on with this plane? Sucker's acting so funny.
We'll do a full control check on the ground then, huh?
Tahoma 185, did I clear you for visual?
Affirmative.
Okay, and keep your speed up. Contact tower 118.3.
18.3. 185.
The aircraft descends through 3,200 feet, and the captain hastily commences the in-range checklist. As per company procedures, this would have been completed before descending below 12,000 feet.
In range check. Cabin pressure.
Set?
Bypasses down. Hydraulic pressure. Quantity checks.
As the captain continues the checklist, he discovers that the crossfeed has been left open.
AC pump is on. Green light. Fuel panel. Boost pumps on.
Man, I'm telling you, what is wrong with this plane? It's really funny. I got something all messed up here.
Yeah?
Can you feel it? It's like swinging back and forth.
Yeah, we've got an imbalance on the crossfeed I left open.
Oh, is that what it is?
Yeah.
The crew look forward and discover they are running dangerously low on fuel in the left tank, made drastically more concerning with the crossfeed configuration.
Oh, I see.
Yeah? I see what it is. Yeah? We're gonna flame out if we don't, aren't we? I got crossfeed open. Just keep power on.
And we're losing power.
This is the last transmission recorded on the cockpit voice recorder. Within seconds, Both engines spluttered to a halt, and the 50-ton aeroplane is now a glider, 3,000 feet above Cincinnati. It falls 1.2 miles short of the runway, first colliding with trees, then travelling another 200 feet before it finally comes to rest. The captain survives the crash with only minor injuries. However, the right side of the aeroplane is significantly more damaged. The first officer dies due to what the accident report describes as massive acute body trauma. In the days after the crash, the wreckage field is examined for clues. Evidence suggests that the engines had indeed failed in the final moments of the flight. Compressor blades were found with no evidence of bending, as would occur if the engines were operating at the time of the crash. Vegetative debris is found within the engine, however there is no evidence of any burning or charring. The load manifests show that there should have been a total of 3,800 pounds of fuel on board for landing. In the following weeks, investigators from the National Transport Safety Board will go on to discover how the pilots managed to starve their engines of fuel. The investigation of the crash of Air Tahoma 185 would be centred around the fuel state of the aircraft in the lead up to the dual engine failure. There was sufficient fuel on board for the flight from Memphis to Cincinnati. However, all evidence showed that this fuel was not being supplied to the engines at the time of the crash. The link here was the captain's actions almost half an hour before anything went wrong. The captain commenced cross-feeding of fuel in the cruise portion of the flight. Cross-feeding involves opening a valve which allows for fuel from one tank to be provided to both engines. However, as will be discussed later, the captain became distracted shortly after commencing the crossfeed, leading to a significant fuel imbalance, as fuel from only the left tank was being burnt. A fuel imbalance has a number of effects on the flying characteristics of an aeroplane. In this case, the first officer made several statements regarding the behaviour of the aeroplane. He was likely referring to the unusual lateral control forces required to keep the wings level. As fuel was being burnt from the left tank, the ride became drastically heavier in comparison. Thus, the right side of the aeroplane required more lift to keep the wings level. To achieve this, an unusual amount of left aileron had to be held in by the FO, who would have slowly become more disorientated as the imbalance grew. This was the first clue that something was wrong. However, the captain didn't respond to the first 5 concerned statements made by his first officer. Had he investigated further, checking for a possible fuel imbalance would be one of the first items to look for in response to unusual control forces. Instead, the captain's single response was that he would perform a control check once on the ground. The configuration which caused this fuel imbalance will go on to create drastically more concerning problems. The procedure to cross-feed fuel in the Convair 580 involved 4 specific steps. Both fuel boost pumps would be turned on, then cross-feed valves opened. The boost pump for the tank not in use would then be turned off, and the fuel shut-off valve closed. This would ensure that fuel from the tank in use would only be provided to the engines. The system was not designed for fuel to be transferred from tank to tank, as this could result in structural damage or fuel overflow. When the captain set up the crossfeed on this flight, he left the fuel shutoff valve open. He believed that a check valve did not allow for fuel transfer to occur, and that closing the shutoff valve could lead to a failure in the fuel system. Both these assumptions were incorrect, however. A check valve did not exist, and there is no evidence for fuel shutoff valve failures in the past in Convair 580s. By keeping the fuel shutoff valve open, all the fuel pumped out of the left tank and not used by the engines was transferred into the right tank, meaning that the fuel level on the left depleted unusually quickly. Once it ran dry, both engines gradually became starved of fuel. While there was still fuel available in the right tank, it couldn't be pumped to the engines in this configuration. Had the crew turned on the right fuel boost pump, a last-minute refiring of the engines may have been possible. However, in the heat of the situation, this option was not considered by the captain nor the FO, who at this point would have still been working to determine exactly what the issue was. Usually, pilots only cross-feed fuel for a few minutes before returning the fuel system to its default configuration. So how did the captain become so distracted that he completely forgot about the crossfeed? Air Tahoma 185 had departed Memphis with an incorrect load sheet on board. The captain's intention was to rectify the issue in flight, in order to lessen any delays. He noted that the landing gear strut sat properly, and his general experience told him that the aircraft was within limits. Once in the cruise, after opening the crossfeed, the captain worked on a new load sheet. He eventually discovered that he had entered the incorrect fuel burn. Upon recalculation, the issue was rectified, and the aircraft was confirmed within weight and balance limits. However, the relatively complex calculations had taken so long to solve that he jumped straight into preparing the aircraft for descent, forgetting about the crossfeed which he had left open. The aircraft never should have departed with an incorrect load sheet on board. It goes directly against FAA regulations, since there was no way to be sure that the aircraft was within both max weight and centre of gravity limits. Attempting to finish the load sheet once in the air became quite a significant contributor to the accident, distracting the captain from the crossfeed while also placing the crew in catch-up mode for descent, only completing the in-range checklist as the aircraft descended through 3,000 feet. The timely completion of the in-range checklist would have caught the issue, as it directs the crew to check the aircraft's fuel state. Upon seeing a growing imbalance of fuel towards the right tank, the crew could have rectified the crossfeed before it became a major problem. However, it did become a major problem. The crew only recognised the massive fuel imbalance seconds before the engines failed, leaving the aircraft powerless, descending below the glide slope, and crashing short of the runway. The NTSB released their final accident report for Air Tahoma 185 on the 2nd of May 2006. It listed the primary cause of the accident as fuel starvation, resulting from the captain's decision not to follow approved fuel crossfeed procedures. The NTSB heavily criticised the conduct of the captain, stating that he did not promptly respond to the first officer's concerns about the control forces. He should have started the in-range checklist earlier, and he never should have allowed the plane to take off in the first place, due to the incorrect load sheet. The accident of Air Tahoma 185 and the lessons learned from it can be broken down into two categories. Firstly, crew resource management is a vital skill, and if used effectively, could have prevented this accident long before anything went wrong. And while pilots are required to have a strong understanding of all systems in their aeroplane, this accident shows that even a slight misconception can lead to a tragic outcome. Because if there is potential for a problem to develop, it will eventually occur under the right circumstances. The combination of these two issues led to disaster, thus showing why strong CRM and aircraft knowledge are so vital to good airmanship.